Now that we have our project created, it's time to make either a component or a theme. This video is going to focus on creating a Kickstart component, and you kind of start with the last step here. We're going to start by actually creating the Git repository for this component, even though we haven't written any code for it. So for this example, I'm just going to call this, actually I'm going to call this hover box. We're going to create a little box that turns from blue to red when you hover over it. Obviously not a very sophisticated component, but should be simple enough to kind of get the point across for this example. And it's important to initialize this repository with a README, so it needs to be a non-empty repository. Adding a README is both something you ought to do, and it will accomplish that effect of starting with a file. So I'm also, just to kind of keep this quick, I'm going to add a new file as our component. So the README is for the user's instruction. It'll also be the description of this component on the Kickstart store. And then we'll add component.sass, which is obviously just the component itself. This is the Sass code that will be imported into the user's project. And I'm not going to write it just yet, so I'm just going to write some chunk text there. So now we have the two files we need. The next step is to go into our project. I've named mine Kickstart Lab. And again, all you need to know about that is this is simply a clone of the Kickstart repository. And let's get into lib sass vendor. And we need to work in there for a while. As you can see, there's just these two components that are already in there. We're going to pull in ours. To do that, we're going to copy this. This is the SSH address for this repository. And it's important to do git submodule add. We're not going to do git clone. It's tempting to do that, but we want git submodule add. And I know that's confusing because it's even going to say cloning, but trust me, it's different. Now if we look in this directory, we have our hoverbox component. Easy enough. Just one more thing to actually link it to the project. We need to edit that index.sass file. And this is what your user will do as well. They're going to import hoverbox/component.sass. So it's actually importing this file, which is currently useless. Okay. So again, this is vendor/index.sass. So it's in our project now, and if we look at the live website, there's nothing there. Not that we would expect anything because we haven't actually put in this hoverbox thing. Now the rest of this junk that you see here is probably going to be different from what you see. This is just stuff that I've added for my own purposes to kind of test out themes and extensions. But let's go back to, actually we're going to open up hoverbox and, no. We're going to go to hoverbox README. I think it's best to actually write the documentation for what you're about to do before you do it. So we're going to tell the user how to use this. Hoverbox is a component that adds a color changing box to your website. When the user hovers over the box, it will change from blue to red. To implement, simply, we want them to add the component to vendor/index.sass. Let's give them an example. Okay. Use the hoverbox mixin. And this plus sign is shorthand for include. So this is exactly the same as writing include hoverbox. Okay. And Now this is also, by the way, the description that will appear in the Kickstart store when someone is looking at your component. Let's actually write the damn code. Hover box component. Of course, we don't need that. And this equal sign is shorthand for mixin. So this is the same as writing mixin hover box. Whoa. Okay. And our hover box is going to be a little bit wide, a little bit high, have a background of blue, and when you hover over it, it's going to change its background to red. Now, this is actually bad for a Kickstart component because so far, this is nothing more than a code snippet. It's going to change from blue to red, but it really ought to know what blue and red means in the user's project. In other words, let's actually reuse the stuff that's there. Let's use whatever the user's blue color is. And that's the syntax for that, and that's in the docs. Okay, so it's not just any blue or red, it is the blue and the red that are defined in the theme. And every theme should have this. Okay, that should be it. Now, what we have just created so far is completely sufficient to call this a day and say that this is a Kickstart component. I'm going to go into the hoverbox directory, and so now we're inside this git submodule. So if we run git status, we're looking at just the changes in our git submodule. And this looks about right. We had a readme and a component, and we edited both of them. So I'm going to git commit finishing component. Push it up there, and we're good. Now this might look a little premature because if you look here, this still is exactly the same. I don't see any hoverbox. And that's just because in our own implementation we haven't added that yet. So let's go up a level, and let's go up a few more levels actually to the root of our project. Now let's follow our own documentation. So first of all, we need to actually create a class. Let's just say it's my hoverbox and include hoverbox. Done. And then of course, let's make it actually appear in the Jade. So I have one small error. I actually called color. This should be colors with an S. So we're calling the whole map of colors. Okay, so now in style.sass we have my hoverbox, and we're including the hoverbox component. We just need to go into that Jade file, index, and add it to our markup, my hoverbox. That should be it. We should now see the component, and here it is. It changes from blue to red. And the interesting thing here is that you should notice that the red is not just any red, blue is not just any blue, it is in fact the blue and the red from the theme. And just to drive that home, let's change it to a different theme. Once that compiles, you'll see that the blue will look kind of similar, but the red in this theme is very different. So our component is collaborating with all of the other third-party stuff that is being added around it. And that's really the beauty of Kickstart. And that's pretty much all it takes to create a component. Enjoy.